Everyone in town whispered about the hostel's dark past, but no one knew the full story. Not until I stepped into it. When I joined the hostel for my pre-university college, I was excited. I needed freedom from my parents, being the youngest and most pampered child. The hostel was just 15 kilometers away from home, so I thought it would be easy for my parents not to miss me too much. The first day at college was like I had finally opened my wings. I felt free, full of excitement and new possibilities. But the very next day, things took a strange and terrifying turn. It was around 1 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Homesickness had hit me hard. So I stepped out of my room, feeling overwhelmed, and started crying quietly in the hallway. After a while, my friend came out of her room too, also in tears. We sat together, trying to comfort each other, talking about life, our families, and why being away from home was harder than we thought. We kept talking until about 2:30 a.m. when my friend said she needed to go to the washroom. We had common washrooms, so she asked me to wait outside while she went in. I stood there, yawning, barely awake when suddenly I heard her scream. She burst out of the washroom, grabbed my arm, and kept repeating, "We need to get out of here." She was shaking, terrified. I tried to calm her down and asked what happened, but all she kept saying was, "Blood and hair, blood and hair." Confused, I decided to go inside and see for myself. I opened the first washroom door. Everything seemed normal. My heart raced as I walked to the third stall, the one she had pointed out. Slowly, I pushed open the door, and that's when I saw it. Blood streaked across the floor, and what looked like a bunch of long, freshly cut hair lying in the middle. It was horrifying. My legs felt weak, and I ran out immediately. A group of students had gathered by then, trying to calm my friend down. We rushed to the warden and told her what we saw. Her face instantly showed worry, but she tried to keep calm. She asked us not to tell anyone, especially not our parents, and insisted we stay in her room for the night. My friend was so scared she started running a fever and eventually went home. She never came back. She changed her college. A few days later, some seniors came looking for me. They had heard what happened and wanted to talk. That night, they asked me to come to their block. I was curious and nervous at the same time. While walking towards the senior block, I noticed an old tree and a locked room next to it. The door of the room was covered in strange markings, almost like someone had performed some kind of ritual there. I later learned it was room number 23. I had heard about bad luck associated with the number 13, but 23. That was new and strange. When I arrived at the seniors' room, they asked me if I had brought non-veg food from outside on the night of the incident. Surprised, I said yes, explaining that my parents had brought some for me and my roommates. They told me something unsettling. Outside non-veg food was strictly forbidden in the hostel. They warned me never to bring it again, as it was linked to certain unspoken rules of the hostel. Still shaken, I asked them about the room I saw next to the tree. The mood shifted instantly. They looked at each other, visibly uneasy, before one of them said, "You shouldn't go near that room. No one should." That only made me more curious, but something about their tone stopped me from asking any more questions. The next morning, I woke up early and was heading back to my room when I saw a crowd gathered in front of the hostel office. A girl stood there with her parents, her face and arms covered in deep, disturbing scars. Her parents were arguing with the hostel in charge, demanding answers. The hostel in charge's face was stern, and I overheard her say something that sent chills down my spine. "I'm sorry, there is one, and it will do its work. It harmed your daughter, so you should leave the college." That same day, my parents visited me again and brought more chicken. Remembering what the seniors told me, I tried to convince them not to bring it, but my dad brushed it off, saying, "Be adventurous." Despite my hesitation, I gave in. That night, a group of us sat on the top bunks, talking about everything that had been happening. None of us could sleep, So the conversation shifted to spiritual stories and strange experiences. We talked until 3 a.m., and finally we decided to sleep. In the middle of the night, my friend woke me up. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I was half asleep, but I could hear something, a faint noise like rustling. And then I noticed it. The fan above my bed, which we had made sure to turn off, was spinning slowly. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My mind immediately went to the chicken I had brought into the hostel. I had forgotten all about it. I didn't dare move or even breathe. My friend grabbed my hand, and we both lay there frozen in fear. Morning came, and as the sunlight crept into the room, we finally dared to get down from our beds. The fan had stopped, but what we saw next terrified us even more. Chicken bones were scattered all over the floor of our room. No one knew how they got there, and no one wanted to find out. That same day, I told my zoology teacher, who was like a father figure to me, about everything that had been happening. He listened carefully and comforted me. But just a week later, he passed away suddenly. He had been completely healthy, which made his death feel even more unnatural. To this day, I wonder if telling him about the incident somehow cursed him. I regret it deeply, and his loss haunts me. After that, more strange things kept happening in the hostel. Teachers left, wardens resigned, and students continued to experience unexplainable things. 6 months later, they moved our college to a new building, but those 6 months were the most terrifying and thrilling time of my life. Even now, as I look back, I can't help but wonder what happened in that hostel. Some questions were never answered, and the darkness of room No. 23 still lingers in my mind. It was a quiet night, too quiet for my liking. The kind that makes your skin crawl a little. I was driving home after a party, probably around 3 a.m., and stopped at a gas station to fill up my tank. I'd heard they had the best pies in town, and after a night of drinking, it seemed like the perfect idea. As I sat in my car, waiting for the pump to finish, I noticed 2 guys in an intense argument with one of the gas station attendants. They were loud, cursing, and waving their arms around, clearly drunk or angry, probably both. I didn't pay much attention at first. I was tired and just wanted to get home. After filling up, I parked my car and walked toward the shop to grab that pie I had been thinking about. But I saw those 2 guys again before I could reach the door. This time, they had joined a group of 4 other men standing around their car, looking upset. Something about how they inspected their vehicle didn't sit right with me. They were all well-dressed, but the tension in the air was palpable. As I got closer, one of them approached me. He looked frustrated but polite enough. "Hey man," he said, "our tire's flat, and we need a ride back home to get someone to help us tow the car. We don't have a wheel brace, and the spare tire's no good." I hesitated but then decided to offer my wheel spanner. He took it and went back to his group. I went into the shop, picked up my pie, and when I came out, the same guy approached me again, spanner in hand. "It doesn't fit our wheel nuts," he said, looking more frustrated now. I was starting to feel uneasy. Something about this situation felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. They seemed decent enough, but why were all of them so agitated? And why couldn't they fix their car? Just as I was about to consider offering them a ride home, another one of the guys walked over and said, "All the tires are flat." He sounded panicked. Someone slashed them with a knife. This was where alarm bells started going off in my head. All 4 tires slashed. Who does that? And in the middle of the night. The place they wanted to go wasn't too far, about 5 kilometers. But it was a neighborhood I knew well, one with a reputation for gang activity. I'd gone to school there, and I knew it wasn't the kind of place you wanted to be driving around at night, especially with a group of strangers who'd just been in a fight. I lied. I told them I was heading in the opposite direction, hoping they'd let it go. But the leader of the group wasn't buying it. He looked at me, clearly not convinced. "Come on, man, it's just a quick ride. It'll only take a few minutes." I could feel my pulse quicken. Something wasn't right. I apologized again, trying to be polite but firm, saying I had a friend waiting for me and I was already late. He kept insisting, his voice growing more desperate. That's when one of the others, clearly drunk, started cursing loudly, ranting about how he was going to get revenge on whoever slashed their tires. I could see the tension escalating. The leader of the group, trying to seem reasonable, pulled out his ID, showing me he was from the Navy, probably to earn my trust. But instead of calming me down, it made me even more suspicious. Why was he trying so hard to convince me? Something about the whole thing felt like a setup. I apologized once more, but before I could turn to leave, the leader lost his temper. He grabbed my wheel spanner and threw it across the parking lot in a fit of rage. My heart was pounding now. I knew it was time to get out of there. I walked quickly to my car, trying not to look back. I could hear them muttering and yelling behind me, but I didn't stop to listen. I didn't care about my wheel spanner anymore. I just wanted to get away. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and sped off in the opposite direction of my home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't stop driving until I reached another gas station, about 10 kilometers away. I parked my car and sat there, pie forgotten on the passenger seat, my mind racing. What the hell just happened? Had I narrowly avoided something bad? Or was I just overreacting? After about an hour of sitting there, I figured it was safe to head back home. As I passed the original gas station, I saw that the group and their car was gone. But there was a police car parked in the lot now. I didn't know if it had anything to do with those guys or if the officers were just grabbing something to eat. Somehow, those guys had managed to get home on 4 flat tires. I didn't know how. Maybe they drove on the rims, sparks flying all the way. The thought made me shudder. To this day, I still think about that night. I wonder what might have happened if I'd given them that ride. But deep down, I'm just glad I trusted my gut and got out of there when I did. It was one of those nights when the air felt heavy, almost like the world was holding its breath. The shadows around the old school seemed longer, stretching into the dark, as if something was hiding within them, waiting. It was the Ghost Festival, and the idea of spirits roaming around wasn't just a story anymore. It felt real. That night, my school, for some strange reason, decided to hold a parent-teacher meeting. While the parents gathered inside the hall, a few of us, Joe, Brad, Jenny, Chrissy, my sister, and I, decided to pass the time by hanging around outside. We found ourselves sitting in the middle of the basketball court, daring each other to do something stupid. We were laughing, trying to push the eerie feeling away, until Chrissy dared Brad to go behind the school. The place behind our school was famous for all the wrong reasons. Havsan, we called it. The back hill. It was a quiet, hidden area that we visited during lunch sometimes. But at night, it had a different reputation. There was an old story about a girl who hanged herself there, and people said her ghost haunted the place. Brad didn't want to go. No way, he said, shaking his head. That story's true. I'm not going anywhere near that place. We teased him, but the truth was, none of us wanted to go alone. That's when my sister had an idea. What if we all went together? We can tie ourselves with a rope so no one gets lost. It sounded like a plan. We found a long rope, tied it around each of us, and began walking toward Havsan. The air grew colder as we climbed the stairs. No one said a word, but I could feel the tension rising with every step. It was pitch black. The moon was hidden, and the only sound was our footsteps on the gravel. When we passed through the gate that led to Havsan, I felt something strange. I looked down and realized the knot of the rope had come undone. I wasn't tied to anyone anymore. Panic shot through me. I called out for the others, but there was no answer. The darkness pressed in around me, and I decided to turn back. But just as I was about to head down the stairs, I heard something. Going so soon, a voice whispered from the darkness. It wasn't my friends. I knew that much. The voice was cold, sharp, and full of something I couldn't explain. I ignored it, my heart pounding, and rushed down the steps. As I reached the basketball court, the air was thick with the smell of burning candles. The place was empty. None of my friends were there. I waited, trying to calm my racing heart. After what felt like hours, Joe finally appeared, followed by my sister, Brad, and Jenny. But Chrissy was still missing. We were all scared, but no one wanted to go back into House Ann. We stood by the stairs, calling Chrissy's name, but the only sound that came back was the wind. When she finally came down, she looked pale, her eyes wide and blank with fear. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, shaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, like she was still trapped in whatever had happened. "I lost you all after we passed the gate," she said, her voice trembling. "The rope, it was cut." I called out, but no one answered. I started to feel like something was watching me. Then I saw it. Chrissy took a deep breath before continuing. "I saw this red glow near a tree. I thought maybe it was one of you guys with a flashlight, so I went towards it. But when I got there, the light was gone. Then something dripped on me." She wiped her face as if she could still feel it. "I thought it was rain at first, but when I looked up, I saw her. She was hanging from the tree, the girl from the stories. Her eyes, they were open, and she was smiling. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was evil. And the thing dripping on me, it was blood." Chrissy's hands were shaking now, her voice barely a whisper. I ran as fast as I could, but no matter how far I went, she was always there. I kept turning around, and every time, she was closer. I think I fell at some point, but I don't remember. All I know is that when I woke up, I heard you calling me, and I followed your voice. But even then, I could still smell the candles burning. Brad, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. "We all smelled the candles," he said quietly, "but we didn't see anything." We stood there, none of us knowing what to say. Chrissy was still too shaken to explain more, and honestly, none of us wanted to hear it. After that night, we never went near House Ann again. But the story didn't end there. A few days later, we did some digging and found out the truth about the girl who hanged herself. She had been a student at our school, and she had killed herself after finding out she was pregnant. Her boyfriend, who had promised to stay by her side, left her. 3 months later, he died in a car accident. They said he died with a look of pure terror on his face, his eyes wide open, like he'd seen something or someone. Even now, I still hear the whispers sometimes. That same voice, asking the same question. Going so soon. This actually happened. Not supernatural, not ghostly, just real life. I had just turned 18 and started working in a hospital. One night, I was asked to help move the body of a woman who had died on the operating table. Now my fellow porters had warned me, never do anything that isn't in your job description. Hospitals can be chaotic, and people often try to pass off tasks that aren't your responsibility. Still, it was close to 9 p.m., dark and freezing in the middle of winter, and I didn't feel like I had much of a choice. The usual porter refused to go near the body. He said he was too jittery around the dead, but there was an older porter on the night shift who agreed to help. The operating room nurse reassured me, but she also added, "He's old, so you'll need to do most of the heavy lifting." Great, I thought. When the old porter greeted me, I could already tell tonight was going to be strange. I had missed my last bus home, which was another stress on my mind. We were escorted into the operating theater. There she was, lifeless, a woman in her 40s, with a surgical wound at the back of her head. The room was cold, sterile, and silent. My stomach tightened. We were instructed to wrap her in plastic, then in bed sheets, and slide her into a beige trolley. As I pushed her into the trolley, her body made a heavy plonk sound as it hit the metal. My heart skipped a beat. Now came the journey down the long, dark corridor that led to the mortuary. I didn't know why the mortuary was placed so far away from the main hospital wards, but it only added to the unsettling feeling. The old porter, who was set to retire the very next day, casually chatted about how he'd seen it all in his time. That's when we heard it. A noise like a loud fart, followed by a sickening awe. The old porter turned white. "Never heard one that loud before," he muttered, referring to the gases escaping from the body. I felt my hands grow cold, gripping the trolley tightly. We stepped into the lift, which took us down to the hospital's basement, the same floor as the hospital canteen. Can you believe it? Dead bodies had to pass through the canteen to reach the mortuary. Once the lift opened, we rolled her through the quiet, empty canteen, past where the food deliveries were made, and towards the mortuary doors. I had never been inside the mortuary before. The porter unlocked the doors, and they creaked open to reveal a massive cold room. Marble floors stretched out in front of us, and rows of stainless steel drawers lined the walls. At the far end of the room, a white cot sat alone, reserved for children who had passed away. That image hit me like a punch to the gut. We moved to the drawer that had been assigned for her. The old porter went to fetch the scissor lift, the device that would raise her body to the height of the mortuary drawer. He struggled with it, though. Each time he pumped it up, it would fall back down. After a few tries, he looked at me and said, "You get the feet." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. But the job had to be done. I grabbed her feet while he lifted her head. She bent like a banana as we lifted her. And then it happened. He dropped her. There was a dull, sickening thud, like dropping a heavy egg on tiles. My hand shook as I held her legs, my mind racing. I looked at the porter. He was as pale as the marble floor beneath us. He quickly peeled back the bed sheets, and we both watched in horror as her body began to gush blood under the plastic wrap. My shirt was splattered with blood, and I froze, unable to move. Eventually, we managed to get her into the drawer, though it felt like an eternity. The scissor lift finally cooperated after we manually chalked it, but by that point, my nerves were completely shot. What's worse, when the porter opened the drawer, I realized it wasn't just for her. There was no separate space like in the movies. It was just one big drawer where multiple bodies lay side by side, separated by nothing but a thin metal sheet. The sight of it made me feel faint. We left the mortuary as quickly as possible. I stumbled out of the hospital, still shaking, and made my way to the bus stop. It was nearly 11:30 p.m., and my bus never showed. With no other choice, I started the long, cold walk home minus 9.5 miles, all in the dark. Every sound around me heightened my paranoia. My mind replayed the night's events, the thud of the body hitting the floor, the blood. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that followed me like a shadow. Just when I thought the night couldn't get worse, 2 miles from home, I was jumped by a group of men. I didn't even see it coming. They beat me, took my money, and left me with 2 black eyes. So there I was, tired, bloody, and bruised, with 9.5 miles of misery behind me. That night, life had shown me both death and brutality. I was just 18, fresh out of school, and already haunted by what I'd seen and experienced. That night, I learned that some things in life aren't just scary. They're real, and they stay with you. Love, Paul the porter. It was a hot summer night, and the power had been out for hours. We had no choice but to sit outside, trying to catch whatever breeze we could. You know how, in times like that, you either sit outside or on the roof, waiting for the electricity to return. Well, that night, we were sitting on the big balcony of our apartment on the 3rd floor, just waiting for the air to cool. Around 11:00 p.m., we decided to sleep out there. The air was heavy and still, without any light. The darkness felt thicker than usual. My mom and brother were still inside, doing something. I can't remember exactly what, while my father and I settled down and dozed off on the balcony. A few moments later, I was jolted awake by a sound I'll never forget. A scream, like someone was shouting for help. My heart started racing. I glanced over at my father, who was still fast asleep beside me. I wanted to wake him up, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear, or maybe I was just too confused to act. The scream, it was deep, like a man's voice, faded into the night, as if whoever was screaming was running far away. And then it disappeared. I lay there, frozen. My eyes scanned the dark, trying to figure out where the voice had come from, but everything was still. Nothing moved. After a few minutes, I told myself it was probably nothing and closed my eyes again, hoping I'd be able to sleep. But just as I started to drift off, there it was again. That same scream, even louder this time, like it was closer. I opened my eyes, my body tense, heart pounding in my chest. The scream echoed through the empty night, and it sounded like it was coming from all directions. It was as if whoever was shouting kept moving, sometimes near, sometimes far, but I couldn't tell where. I'd wanted to wake my dad up again, but for some reason, I didn't. The whole night passed like this, with the screams coming and going, and I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, staring into the dark, listening to this strange voice that seemed to be lost in the night. It felt like hours, but I never saw anyone. There was no sign of anything unusual, just that haunting voice, echoing through the silence. The next morning, when I woke up, everything was normal. The power was back, and the world outside was buzzing with life again. I didn't say anything about what I heard to my mom, my brother, or even my father. I wasn't sure if they'd believe me, or if they'd think I had just been dreaming. After all, there wasn't any news of anything strange happening that night. No missing person, no accident, nothing that could explain what I had heard. Years later, I finally mentioned it to my brother. I told him about the screams, and he couldn't remember anything from that night. He laughed and said it must have been a dream, that maybe I was half asleep and imagined the whole thing. But even now, as I think about it, I can still hear that voice in my head. I know I wasn't dreaming. It felt too real. Sometimes memories blur with dreams. You know how you remember certain things from your childhood, but can't always tell if they happened or if they were just fragments of your imagination. This night was like that for me, but every time I recall it, I get chills, and I still wonder who was screaming that night. And why did it sound like they were trapped in the darkness, calling out for help, with no one else but me to hear? I wish I had woken my father that night. Maybe then I would have known the truth. It was supposed to be a simple project, a college short film about illegal street racing. Nothing too complicated, right? But what started as a regular night of shooting quickly turned into one of the scariest experiences of my life. And trust me, it wasn't the racing that scared me. I had just started my first semester in college, and our department decided to enter a short film competition. We wanted to make something impactful, so we chose to highlight the dangers of illegal street racing. I'm from Chennai, and if you know anything about illegal racing there, you've heard of places like Kesamedu and Visarpedi. These areas are infamous, not just for racing, but for being dangerous at night. We planned to film at night, like real races. My friend, who was leading the project, assured us that he'd gotten police permission. He even said everything was taken care of, so we didn't worry about it. It was supposed to be a smooth shoot. We gathered a crew, packed up our gear, and headed to our filming spot. We even called up some local racers to make the scenes look real. When midnight hit, we started filming the first scene. The sound of roaring engines echoed through the empty streets. It felt like we were in a movie ourselves. But just as we were wrapping up the first scene, I noticed a sudden change in the air. The sound of sirens cut through the night. My heart skipped a beat. At first, I didn't panic. After all, my friend said we had permission, right? I thought the cops showing up was just a misunderstanding. But then my friend turned to me, his face pale. That's when he confessed. We didn't have any permission. My stomach dropped. We had to run, and fast. Everyone jumped onto their bikes and scattered in different directions. I barely had time to think before one of the racers grabbed me, pulling me onto his bike. As we sped off into the night, I looked back and saw the police closing in on the others. My friends didn't make it out. They were caught. I was alone with the racer, and I had no idea where he was taking me. We zipped through dark streets, twisting and turning, trying to lose the cops. The tension in my chest tightened with each passing second. I knew I was in way over my head. Finally, we reached a hideout, a small dark room in the middle of nowhere. The guy told me to stay put while he went to check on the situation. I was left alone in a place that felt like the kind of spot you only see in crime movies. I'd heard about this area before. Murders, thieves, gang activity. It wasn't somewhere you wanted to be, especially in the middle of the night. The silence felt heavy, and my mind raced with every possible worst-case scenario. Hours passed like years. I sat there, surrounded by these guys I didn't know, watching them smoke weed and get high. The clock ticked slowly, and every sound outside made me jump. Part of me thought about running, but I didn't even know where I was. And if I left, where would I go? I didn't want to draw any attention to myself. At around 2:30 a.m., the racer came back with another guy. They sat with me as we waited for daybreak. Those were the longest, most terrifying hours of my life. My mind kept drifting to my friends. Were they okay? What would happen if the police came back? The thought of being stuck with these guys made my skin crawl. I knew something was off, but I had no idea just how bad it was. Finally, as the first light of morning crept in, the racer told me it was safe to head to the police station. He dropped me off nearby, and I saw my friends standing outside the station, looking exhausted but relieved. As I walked up to them, one of them gave me a look I'll never forget. "Do you know who you were with last night?" he asked, his voice low, almost shaking. I didn't understand what he meant at first, but then he dropped the bombshell. The guy I had spent the night with, the one who hid me from the police, was a wanted killer. Not only that, but he had a price on his head from rival gangs. If the wrong people had seen me with him, I wouldn't be standing here right now. I could have been killed. My legs went weak as the reality of what he said sank in. I had been hiding with a murderer, completely unaware. That whole night, I had been one step away from being in the middle of something deadly. I looked back at my friends and couldn't believe how close I had come to losing everything. Even now, thinking about it sends chills down my spine. That night wasn't just about racing. It was a harsh reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control. One minute, you think you're just making a film, and the next, you're running for your life, surrounded by danger you didn't even see coming. I guess that's the thing about life. You never know how close you are to the edge until you're hanging off it. I still remember it like it was yesterday. It all started when I was in 7th grade, at the peak of my popularity. The following year, I even became the class monitor. One day in August, my friends and I were talking about ghosts after school. One of my friends mentioned a haunted house nearby. I had never heard of it before, so I brushed it off. I didn't believe in that kind of stuff because I believed in Hanumanjaya. But as I sat at home later that day, the thought of the haunted house kept creeping into my mind. No matter how much homework I tried to focus on, I couldn't shake it. Finally, curiosity got the best of me. I picked up the phone and called my friend, asking him more about the house. He told me the location. It was near a commercial building I was familiar with, but I had no idea it was supposed to be haunted. The next day, which was a Saturday, I met him at school. We talked more about the house, and he gave me the details. When I suggested we check it out the next day, he looked at me like I was crazy. "No way. I'm not going there with you. Are you serious? That place is cursed." But I wasn't going to let it go. I convinced him to come with me, and we made a plan to meet the next day, Sunday, at noon. The next day, we stood in front of the house. It didn't look as scary as I imagined, but it was old, covered in dust, and looked like it hadn't been touched in years. My friend was already getting nervous. "We really shouldn't go inside," he muttered, but I ignored him. The gate creaked as I pushed it open, and without a second thought, I walked up to the main door. "Are you coming or not?" I asked him. He hesitated, then followed me inside, though I could see the fear in his eyes. Inside, the house was dark and smelled of something old and forgotten. It wasn't terrifying, just unsettling. I flicked on a light switch, half expecting it not to work, but to my surprise, the dim bulbs flickered to life. "See," I said to him. "There's nothing here." He wasn't convinced. "That's exactly why we should leave," he whispered. I decided to explore further, trying to act cool. I sat down on an old dusty couch, pulled an apple from my pocket, and took a bite. "Relax," I told him, my voice echoing in the empty house. But as soon as I spoke, the front door slammed shut with a loud bang. My friend let out a scream and started running around, panicking. I tried to calm him down, telling him it was just the wind, but he wasn't having it. "I want to go home," he cried. "We'll go soon," I said, trying to keep my cool, though my heart was starting to race. "But first, let's check upstairs. Then we'll leave, I promise." After some convincing, he finally agreed, and we cautiously made our way up the creaky staircase. Every step seemed louder than the last, and I could feel the tension building between us. When we reached the top, there was a single door at the end of the hall. It was slightly open, and something about it felt wrong. I looked at him and said, "You go inside and see if there's anything there." He stared at me, wide-eyed. "Are you kidding me? You want me to go in there alone?" "Fine," I sighed. "We'll go together." Taking a deep breath, I grabbed a rusty metal rod from the floor, just in case. Slowly, we pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was pitch dark, except for the faint light coming from the broken window. Suddenly, my friend froze, his eyes wide with terror. "Ghost. There's a ghost in here." He bolted for the stairs, screaming at the top of his lungs. For the first time, a chill ran down my spine. Could he have seen something? I swallowed my fear and chased after him. "You saw a ghost. Then what are you running for?" I teased, though my voice was shaking. Gripping the rod tightly, I turned back to face the room. If there was something in there, I wasn't about to let it scare me off. Stepping inside again, I swung the rod wildly through the air, hoping to hit something, anything. And then, to my horror, it hit something solid. We both screamed as the sound of shattering glass filled the room. I had thrown the rod so hard, it broke the window. Breathing heavily, we stood still, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. No ghost came out. No creepy noises followed. After waiting for what felt like forever, I gathered the courage to step back into the room. This time, with the light streaming in from the broken window, I could finally see what we had been so afraid of. There, lying in the corner, was not a ghost, but a dusty, old skeleton. A fake one, like the kind doctors use. I couldn't help but laugh. "Seriously, this is your ghost?" I said, pointing to the skeleton. My friend, still pale, stared at it for a moment before laughing too, though I could tell he was more relieved than anything. "I told you it was just a story," I said with a grin. "A doctor used to live here. That must have been his." With that, we left the house, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. As we walked away, I glanced back at the old house one last time. It didn't seem so scary anymore, but I couldn't help but wonder if there was still something lurking in the shadows, watching us leave. But that was enough ghost hunting for one day. It's been decades, but even now, every time I think about it, my heart races. I was 23 years old, newly married, and had just moved to a small city in southwestern Ontario with my husband. He had gotten a new job, and we were excited to start a new chapter. Since I didn't have a car, I walked everywhere to apply for jobs. I got into the habit of walking a couple of miles every day, which felt good. I always dressed neatly, partly because I might meet a potential employer, and partly because I've never been one to dress flashy. I liked keeping things simple. One afternoon, I was walking back from a shopping mall that was on the edge of town. It was a long walk home, about a few miles, but it was a nice day. The road was a busy one, with 4 lanes of traffic, and I was walking on the sidewalk, facing the cars coming toward me. That's when it happened. A white pickup truck pulled up right next to me. The window was down, and the driver leaned over, calling out in a low, muffled voice. At first, I couldn't make out what he was saying. I stopped but stayed where I was, cautious. He mumbled something again. I hesitated, but my gut was telling me not to get too close. Still, I thought maybe he was asking for directions, so I said, "Pardon me." Trying to keep my distance, he leaned further over and said, "Get in, I'll give you a ride." I could see him more clearly now. His hair was long, stringy, and oily. He looked dirty, and his voice slurred like he was drunk or stoned. My heart started pounding in my chest, but I tried to stay polite. "No, thank you," I said. "I'm enjoying the walk." Suddenly, his face twisted in anger, and he spat out an obscenity before speeding off. I remember standing there for a second, trying to shrug it off, telling myself it was nothing. But deep down, something didn't feel right. I kept walking, my pace a little quicker now. Then, a few minutes later, I saw it, the same white pickup truck. This time, it was coming back toward me, and my stomach dropped. Worse, there were 2 other men with him now. Panic surged through me as the truck turned onto a side street, cutting me off. The doors flew open, and the 2 men jumped out. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. My feet just moved. I ran straight into the busy street, dodging between speeding cars. Horns blared, tires screeched, but I didn't stop. I kept running, my heart pounding, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Miraculously, I made it across the 4 lanes of traffic without getting hit, but I didn't stop running. I couldn't. I kept glancing over my shoulder, terrified that they'd come after me again. My mind raced with fear. What if they catch me? What if no one helps? Just as I was trying to figure out where to go, whether to knock on a stranger's door, 2 women in a car pulled up beside me. They'd seen the whole thing. They asked if I was okay if I wanted to go to the police. I was too shaken to think clearly. All I wanted was to go home. So, they drove me home. I couldn't stop trembling. The moment I got inside, I locked the doors, closed the curtains, and waited for my husband to come home from work. When he finally walked through the door, I broke down. I could barely get the words out. We went to the police station that night, but I didn't have much information to give them, just that it was a white pickup truck and a vague description of the driver. The officer told me, "Do you know how many white pickup trucks are out there?" I felt so helpless. After that day, I couldn't walk anywhere alone. Even when I was with my husband, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I was always looking over my shoulder, waiting for something to happen. A little while after the incident, we moved out of the city to a rural area. We had a long driveway with a mailbox at the end. Even though it didn't make sense, I couldn't bring myself to walk down that driveway to get the mail. I knew logically that the man in the truck couldn't possibly know where we lived, but the fear wouldn't go away. Whenever my husband worked late, I would tape newspaper over the windows so no one could see in. I know it sounds extreme, but the trauma stayed with me. Even now, years later, the fear still lingers in the back of my mind. I can't help but think, what if I hadn't run? What if they had caught me? What might have happened? But here's what I've realized. Fear can take hold of you, but it doesn't have to define you. I've learned that while I might never forget that day, it's not going to control me. The world can be scary, but I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. In the end, I survived. It was many years ago, in a village tucked deep in the heart of Kerala. People still talk about the story, though most speak in whispers. The rubber estate where it all happened still stands, hidden behind rows of towering trees, its secrets buried under years of silence. But the villagers know better. There was once a vast rubber estate owned by a man who lived far away in London. He rarely visited, leaving the estate in the hands of workers. In the center of the estate stood an old bungalow, 2 stories tall, surrounded by nothing but rubber trees for miles. Nearby, a small outhouse was home to a rubber tapper named Robin and his wife, Rosie. Robin and Rosie had a love marriage. It wasn't easy. They had gone against Rosie's parents' wishes, which had cost them their family ties. Still, they were in love, and that was enough. At least it seemed so in the beginning. Robin adored Rosie. She was beautiful, and he was head over heels for her, always working hard, saving up money to buy her a special gift, a pair of silver anklets for their anniversary. But love stories don't always end like fairy tales. What started as a happy marriage slowly turned dark. Robin had always enjoyed drinking, even when they were dating, but after the wedding, his drinking became more frequent. At first, Rosie didn't think much of it. She loved him after all. But things started to change. Robin, once loving and gentle, became jealous. He would come home drunk, his eyes filled with suspicion instead of love. He started accusing Rosie of things she never did, his words cutting deep. Still, Rosie hoped things would change. She believed a baby could bring them closer, could heal what was broken. And one day, she found out she was pregnant. At first, it seemed like her prayers were answered. Robin was thrilled. He even cut back on his drinking for a while. The joy returned to their home, and for the first time in months, Rosie allowed herself to believe they could be happy again. But happiness doesn't always last. Rumors started to spread through the village, whispers that the baby might not be Robin's. And just like that, the jealousy that had simmered in Robin's heart began to boil over. He couldn't shake the thought that Rosie had betrayed him. One night, after drinking more than usual, he confronted her. "Tell me the truth," he demanded, his voice slurred but sharp. "Is the baby even mine?" Rosie, already exhausted from months of his accusations, finally snapped. She had been holding in her frustration for too long. "How dare you?" she yelled, her voice shaking with years of pent-up anger. "I've been nothing but loyal to you, but all you see is your own jealousy." That night was different. Robin, blinded by rage and alcohol, didn't hold back. He hit her harder than he ever had before. His blows were violent, and Rosie, who had hoped for a better future for their child, fell to the floor, clutching her stomach. She tried to speak, but the pain was overwhelming. The room spun as she lost consciousness, bleeding heavily. Robin, in that instant, realized what he had done. The weight of his actions hit him, but it was too late. Desperate and panicking, he didn't know what to do. He lifted Rosie's limp body, her blood staining his hands, and carried her out to the estate, where the trees stood like silent witnesses. As the first light of dawn crept through the branches, Robin reached a low-hanging tree. His mind raced, clouded by regret, guilt, and fear. He thought he had killed her, and in his madness, he decided to hide what he'd done. He tied a rope to the tree and hanged Rosie's body, believing it would be the end of it. But Rosie wasn't dead. As Robin stepped back, her eyes fluttered open. She clung to him, her body shaking with the last bit of life she had left. But Robin stood frozen, watching her struggle, too numb to act, too consumed by guilt to save her. By the time the villagers found her hanging from the tree, it was too late. Rosie was dead, and Robin had disappeared. The police searched for him, but he was nowhere to be found. The village was left in shock, but they weren't surprised when, 3 days later, Robin's body was discovered back in the same bungalow where they had once lived together. No one knew how he died. Some said it was Rosie's ghost, exacting her revenge. Others believed it was his guilt that had finally consumed him. And that's when the real fear began. After Robin's death, strange things started happening around the estate. Villagers spoke of a shadowy figure moving among the trees at night, Those who passed by late at night heard the faint sound of anklets jingling, the same anklets Robin had once wanted to gift Rosie. Some said it was her spirit wandering the estate, waiting for the chance to take revenge on anyone who dared to cross her path. The rubber estate still stands today, but few dare to go near it. They say if you listen closely at night, you can still hear the anklets ringing through the trees, a reminder of the love that turned to jealousy and the jealousy that turned to death. Istanbul holds its secrets in its narrow alleys, and one of those secrets found its way to us. It was August 2020, and we were staying in a small, cozy apartment rented through Erin, tucked away in a quiet corner near Independence Street and Taksim Square. We thought we were in for a relaxing stay. We had no idea how wrong we were. One morning, just as the sun was starting to rise, the alarm on my phone blared. Still half asleep, I grabbed it to silence it, but there was something strange. A message, scrolling across the screen like a warning. Read, "You need to leave. You have less than a week." At first, we laughed it off. Probably just a glitch, right? Nothing to worry about. We carried on with our day, exploring the streets of Istanbul, enjoying the sights and sounds. But the message stuck with me. I couldn't help but think, what if this isn't just nonsense? As the days passed, little things started to feel off. The street outside seemed quieter than usual. We started hearing strange noises in the middle of the night, footsteps, maybe whispers, coming from the hallway. But when we looked, there was nothing there. On the fourth night, it got worse. I woke up suddenly, my heart pounding, as if something was wrong. I wasn't sure why, but the apartment felt different. It was as if the air had thickened, and the silence became almost unbearable. Then, it happened. A loud, violent knock at the door. We both jumped. The knocking didn't stop. It got louder, more frantic, as if someone was desperately trying to get in. Then, a man's voice, shouting in a language we didn't understand, echoed through the door. Fear gripped me. We didn't know what to do. Stay quiet, hide, run. And just as suddenly, our phone rang. It was the owner of the apartment. "Be quiet," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Please, stay as quiet as you can. This part of Istanbul has been taken over by a group of human traffickers. You need to stay out of sight." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just some harmless prank or strange coincidence. Something serious was happening. We turned off the lights, locked the door, and huddled together, too scared to move, barely even breathing. We could still hear the banging on the door and the aggressive shouting. It felt like hours. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse than the noise. We sat there, frozen, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. After what felt like an eternity, the fear slowly began to lift, and we started to question what had happened. The next morning, everything seemed normal. The streets were bustling again, and there was no sign of the terrifying events from the night before. No one talked about it. It was as if it had never happened at all. We didn't leave the apartment right away, but we couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. And then, on the last day of our stay, the alarm on my phone rang again. The same eerie message scrolling across the screen. "You should have left." I stared at the screen, feeling a chill run down my spine. But nothing happened. No knocking, no shouting, just silence. That's when we realized it. The entire thing, everything we had experienced, was nothing more than a trick. There had been no human traffickers, no danger. We had been played by our fear, our minds running wild in an unfamiliar city. We couldn't help but laugh at how scared we had been over nothing. It was all a fantasy, a twisted fairy tale our minds had created out of fear and imagination. But it felt so real that we decided to write it down. And that's how we came up with the idea for our book, Scary Tales Told at Night.